welcome everyone to the 12-Step Big Book Workshop. My name is Lisa, and I have been a dedicated student of the 12 Steps for many years. Tonight, we're making a significant transition into the final phase of the first stage of our rocket launch as we begin Step 3. Yay! So I'd invite you all to join me in the set-aside prayer, approaching it with an open mind and an open heart, ready to embrace the gift of receiving it with the support of our higher powers. So if you want to mute, unmute, whatever is fine. So, Creator, please set aside everything that my ego thinks I know about Step 1, Step 2, and my search for power, so that I may have a new experience with my choices, my life, my unmanageability, and especially with power. And I hope everyone's using the set-aside prayer, at least somewhat. Every day is better, but if you do it at least a little bit, that'll be good. So we did, Step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So we believe, or we want to be at least willing to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And the important point is it cannot be me any longer. We have relied on ourselves for way too long. And lack of power is our bottom line dilemma. And we also talked about choose your own concept of a power greater than yourself, which if you want to go back and look at that, it's pages 13 and 14. So on those pages, Bill writes, my friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. And then in the appendix, in the back of the book, there's the spiritual experience, which is willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but they are totally indispensable. So we've been on this deep dive mission to get some new clarity of that ultimate question of God or no God, higher power or no higher power, whatever your word is, throw it in there. And along the way, we've had to face the honest facts that we don't have the muscle to fix our own lives, especially the parts that are completely unmanageable. And we've unmasked the bedevilments and seen them for what they really are, the spiritual illness destroying our souls. So tonight, we're taking action. We're going on a thorough search for the higher power to finish up this first big stage of our journey and lock in our connection to a force that's greater than ourselves. So step 1 was all about hitting a wall and admitting we were powerless over our addictions and that our lives were broken. But when we hit step 3, the big book completely pivots because step 3 is all about relationships. And it forces us out of passive defeat and into an active decision. It requires a massive leap of faith towards a higher power of our own understanding. And at the end of the day, nobody can make this choice for us. It takes some real deep soul searching to figure out what we actually believe about the power that's greater than ourselves. And in doing this, we have to remember that it has to come for us, or it's not going to work. Someone else's beliefs, even our parents, don't work for us because it's very, very personal. So think of step 3 as the launch pad. It's the commitment that officially starts that engine in that rocket. But here's the really cool detail about the third step, and it's the prayer. And you might have missed it, even if you've said it 1,000 times. It doesn't end with the word amen. So think about prayers and how generally they end with the word amen. It's pretty much every prayer we know finishes that way. So what might have been, what Bill might have been up to here, it turns out he left it off on purpose because an amen wraps things up and closes out a prayer. And Bill didn't want this prayer to ever end because our surrender isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing daily choice that is supposed to keep running for the rest of our lives. And then we can take a look at step 12 as the 3-stage rocket launch into a new way of living. The first stage consists of steps 1 through 3, which establish our relationship with our higher power. The second stage shifts inward, focusing on our relationship with ourselves through steps 4 through 7. The third stage, which is referred to as the house cleaning portion of our recovery triangle, is found in steps 8 and 9, where we mend our relationships with others by clearing away the past obstacles. Once the launch is complete, we enter what Bill calls the world of the spirit through steps 10, 11, 12. In here, we actively live out the commitment we made in step 3, which is turning away from self-centeredness and moving toward being other-centered. And this shift is beautifully illustrated in the original text by a subtle grammatical choice. In step 11, the spiritual focus is spelled with a capital O for other, while in step 12, our focus shifts to our fellow human beings with the lowercase o, meaning others. So Bill did a lot of that little tricky work in there and didn't tell anyone. People just figured it out. And Bill reminds us that we can have a sense of wonder about losing our grip on reality. Think of the phrase, head in the clouds, feet on the ground. It means we are allowed to have massive dreams and huge spiritual visions. That's the head part in the clouds. But we also have to stay practical, realistic, and take logical steps to get there, keeping our feet on the ground and moving in a logical direction. At the end of the day, recovery isn't about escaping the world. It's about finding that perfect balance between our vision and our daily behaviors and actions. And this brings us to a fundamental question. Is God necessary? And we've been exploring this pretty deeply, but ultimately the answer rests entirely on each and every one of you. You alone determine the role and relevance of the concept God in your recovery journey. As you reflect on what this concept means to you, consider this. What alternative word or phrase better aligns with your newly updated understanding of a power greater than yourself? Some people, when they do the God upgrade, take on a whole different word. They don't even use the word God anymore. For me, internally, I know that whatever word I use, I know what it represents. So I don't really mind whatever word is used. I don't mind if somebody else asks me about God and I describe what my opinion is. To me, it's just a word. So I don't trip over the words, but some people do. And if you do, it's important that you find the word that works for you. And there are literally hundreds of words used to describe God. I mean, even with all the different religions, and there's some here that you can see, they all have a God, except for maybe Buddhism. And I've often wondered, with all these religions, with all these different gods, who made all these gods? Was there one God that made all those gods? All religions think their God is the only God, but all religions have their own gods. So it's kind of, I don't know, I think it just keeps people more separated. I think we should all just have that commonality of a God without having to define it. So when we take a look at step 2, notice that the word God isn't even in anywhere, but the word power is. This isn't a subtle accident. It's right there in your face for a very good reason. Step 2 isn't a religious test about God. It's about your personal concept of power. It's about how you define that higher power, how you interpret it, and whether your current mindset is actually working for you or leaving you completely dry. So, walking this big book path shows us that we have a massive decision to make when we realize our relationship with a higher power just isn't cutting it. If the bedevilments are still running the show and our lives are just as unmanageable as before, it's probably time for an upgrade. Our higher power will only offer as much as we ask for. If we are lacking support, it is time to reach out and ask for more. We have to take a hard look at how much we are connecting to our source of power. That is the only way we'll get the power we need to finally heal from this spiritual malady. On page 53 of the Big Book, when reading with understanding, asks a fundamental question about whether God exists, requiring a personal decision. Answering this question, according to Bill W., is the essential step for achieving a spiritual awakening. And all through this chapter, Bill hammers home a massive point. This has to be your concept, not the book's version, not Bill's version, not AA's version. It doesn't matter what your religion says or what your family wants you to believe. Your concept is the only one that matters because you are the one who has to live by it. Don't limit yourself to old, dusty ideas that didn't work before. Give yourself permission to create a concept that is bigger, broader, and wider than anything you've ever imagined. And this becomes an act of faith, an action based on my beliefs, trust, or conviction, especially when there is no clear guarantee or proof. And we also need the willingness to expand our mind and our ideas in order to make this big decision, which then becomes the foundation of our journey, leading us through the archway to our newfound freedom. So, having made our decision regarding our concept, we now are prepared to move on to step 3. So, to understand what Bill means by made a decision to turn, we have to look closely at our understanding of the word surrender that immediately comes to mind when we discuss step 3. However, surrender does not appear in the 3rd step, nor does it appear anywhere in the Big Book. In fact, a careful look reveals it isn't even in the 12 steps and 12 traditions. While we constantly hear phrases in meeting rooms like, I surrender, or I'm waving the white flag, or I'm willing to surrender, applying this term to step 3 is actually a misperception that can lead to confusion. Surrender is a concept far better suited for step 1, where we admit we are defeated by our addiction and our lives, and we are willing to go in a different direction towards a new creator. Step 3 is not about giving up. 3 is about choosing a new direction. So look at the words, made a decision to turn. It's pretty simple on paper. I'm using my own free will to choose a brand new direction away from unmanageability towards faith in my higher power. But what am I actually turning around? Bill tells us exactly what it is: our will and our lives. That sounds massive, which leads us to a heavy question. What does that look like in real life? What are we actually giving up control over? So look closely at the wording here because it's a game changer. It doesn't say we turn our will over to God. We turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Think about what that means. There is a huge difference between giving up your identity and placing your life in protective custody. Bill W. is staying completely true to step 2 here, reminding us that this care comes from a power as we understand it, not someone else's version of God. A piece of fellowship history surrounds the origin of Chapter 5, how it works. In 1941, the wife of an alcoholic, who would later become an early Al Anon member, discovered the Big Book and introduced it to a small gathering of alcoholic men in California. She passed the book around, mentioning that groups back east had found it highly effective. Unsure of how to navigate the new text, one of the men flipped to the table of contents and noticed Chapter 5. She read the title aloud to the room. It says here, How It Works. Perhaps we should read this first in our meeting today. That single spontaneous decision sparked a powerful tradition, marking the exact moment that reading Chapter 5 became a staple at AA meetings across California. Chapter 5 of the Big Book opens with the well-known reassurance. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Historically, Bill Wilson used the word never in his early drafts. However, the first members of the fellowship advised against this, noting that individuals struggling with alcoholism can be highly resistant to absolute claims. They cautioned that using the word never might provoke newcomers to drink simply to challenge that statement. To maintain a realistic and balanced tone, Bill changed the phrasing to rarely, establishing the foundational opening line used in meetings today. And Bill emphasizes that recovery is contingent upon a full commitment to the program. In Chapter 5, the core requirement is defined by the word thoroughly, specifically referencing those who have thoroughly followed our path. The text implies that individuals who fail to recover typically struggle with a deep capacity for self-honesty. Before introducing the specific 12 steps, Bill establishes rigorous honesty as a non-negotiable prerequisite for recovery. He also introduces the concept of individuals who may be constitutionally incapable of achieving this standard due to inherent personal limitations. And when we do the 4th step, that's when the honesty really comes in. And that's when a lot of big recovery also happens. So the honesty is a key phrase. When Bill uses the phrase constitutionally incapable, he is referring to an individual's inherent biological or genetic makeup. This interpretation is supported by his observation that some individuals seem to be born this way, suggesting a built-in limitation in their capacity for self-honesty. While the text leaves the exact psychological definition open-ended, Bill's main point remains clear. He emphasizes that those facing these innate limitations find it exceptionally difficult to adopt a lifestyle built on rigorous honesty. By defining this barrier, he establishes a crucial ground rule. The very foundation of recovery depends entirely on an unyielding dedication to the truth. So practicing rigorous honesty requires a commitment to complete truthfulness with ourselves and others, serving as the foundation for personal growth in authentic relationships. In practice, this means confronting denial directly, engaging in daily self-examination through step 10, and taking accountability for one's actions without offering any excuses. However, this principle is not an invitation for harsh self-criticism or cruelty. This rigorous honesty balances transparent disclosure with empathy and a thoughtful consideration of how and when to communicate difficult truths. By adopting this balanced approach, individuals can cultivate deeper and more trusting connections in their daily lives. To reinforce my practice of rigorous honesty, I placed sticky notes on all my mirrors that read, "You are now looking at the problem." However, it is vital to recognize that this form of honesty is not intended to be self-abusive. It should never serve as an invitation for toxic self-criticism or emotional punishment. The true objective is liberation, freeing ourselves from the burden of dishonesty without causing further harm to ourselves or others. I encourage everyone to pursue complete honesty, but to ensure that this pursuit remains free from self-destruction. So we can be honest with ourselves without being judgmental. And that's the most important part, that we're honest, but not in a mean, harmful way. We just honestly are going to observe ourselves and see what we're doing. Bill states that some people are simply unable, by their very nature, to understand and build a lifestyle that demands strict honesty. He notes that their chances of recovery are below average, explaining that this group includes people suffering from deep emotional and mental disorders. These are two distinct areas of struggle that can affect each of us in different ways. Even so, Bill emphasizes that recovery is still completely possible for many people if they have the capacity to be honest. This leaves us with a critical question to consider. Do we possess that essential capacity? When the Big Book states, "Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like," it asks us to look honestly at the reality of our active addiction. It points directly to that pivotal moment when our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors finally began to change. For some of us, this profound moment of clarity happened quickly through working the steps, attending meetings, or finding help through therapy and faith. For others, it can take years of struggling before finally finding real traction in sobriety. Giving up the fantasy that we are in control is never easy. However, no matter what challenges or paths brought us to this room, we all share one unifying purpose: the desire for a spiritual awakening. So chapter 5 begins by asking a fundamental question. If you have decided you want what we have, this is the exact moment the Big Book transitions from discussing the reality of addiction to introducing the solution, the spiritual awakening found in the 12 steps. So what is it that these individuals actually have? When you attend a fellowship meeting, it becomes very clear that the members possess something unique. It is not just that they are abstinent, they are genuinely smiling, enjoying their lives, and making real progress. Even if you cannot put a specific name on what they have found, seeing their transformation makes you completely certain that you are ready to leave your old life behind you. When the Big Book asks if we are willing to go to any length, it isn't telling us to do something reckless or dangerous. Instead, it is asking for a deep internal willingness to follow directions and take suggestions. Bill purposefully places a dash right in the middle of this opening thought, creating an intentional pause that forces us to slow down before reading the conclusion. Then you are ready to take certain steps. This phrasing acts as a serious invitation to a life-changing process. However, Bill stays grounded in reality and immediately validates our natural fear by adding, "At some of these we balked." If we are being completely honest, almost everyone hesitates and resists when they first face the actual demands of the steps. The phrase, "we believed we could discover an easier, softer way," perfectly describes human nature and the exact loophole that Activate Addiction always seeks. But the very next words completely smash that illusion. But we could not. This simple truth explains why so many of us repeatedly struggled and failed on our own. Bill makes it incredibly clear that there are really only two forces at play: your addiction or a higher power. You are either actively moving toward one or feeding the other. And this is a profound realization. You are either walking into the light of recovery or sliding back into the darkness of the disease. And there is no middle ground or waiting room. Because of this, Bill delivers the message with absolute urgency. With all the earnestness at our disposal, we implore you to be fearless and thorough from the start. So if you struggle with perfection, it is important to remember that you just need to show up and do your best, knowing your efforts won't be flawless. There is no wrong way to do this work. The only way to fail is to sit on the sidelines. Instead of obsessing over doing it perfectly, focus on doing the best you can right where you are today. Every single time you go through these steps, your spiritual awakening deepens. Just when you think you have everything figured out, you will realize there is a whole new layer to uncover. The Big Book warns us, some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. That absolute letting go is exactly why we use the set-aside prayer. We must set aside what we think we know so we can actually learn something new. And the core intent of the set-aside prayer is clearly defined: to release my knowledge and let go of my experiences so that I may be guided to new realms of understanding and experiences I never even knew existed. And while the Big Book describes addiction as cunning, baffling, and powerful, it is important to recognize that external substances, behaviors, or items are entirely inert. Alcohol, drugs, food, money, and other people do not possess consciousness or willpower. They are not actively conspiring against us. Believing that an external object or person is the primary threat misplaces the source of the problem. This dramatic language simply describes the overwhelming nature of the mental obsession. In reality, the issue is internal, rooted in our own unmanageable thinking and relying on personal willpower that consistently fails us. The external substance is merely a symptom. The true conflict is internal. Admitting defeat in this internal battle at the end of step one directs us toward the critical decision of step 2, identifying and connecting with a genuine source of power that actually works. And the origin of the set-aside prayer can be traced to an AA member named Joe Hawk from Santa Monica. He created it as a practical tool to help people challenge their preconceived notions and embrace new perspectives. This prayer is directly based on the Big Book's guidance on pages 47 and 48, to lay aside prejudices and abandon the illusion of knowing everything. When we use it, we are practicing 3 core principles. The first one is humility, acknowledging that our current understanding is limited. Second is letting go, becoming willing to discard outdated ideas. Third is open-mindedness, which allows us to have a fresh experience with this program. The real secret to why the set-aside prayer changes lives is that it isn't about fixing things. It's about making room. It creates a blank space in your mind for something real, so you can stop reacting out of fear and actually start hearing the truth. On page 59, Bill provides clear direction. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. With these words, Bill points our direction toward a spiritual source of recovery. Unfortunately, a common mistake happens when we confuse the guide with the actual destination. It is easy to fall into the trap of idolizing a teacher or sponsor, essentially staring at the pointing finger instead of looking at the light it is pointing toward. A true teacher or sponsor simply stands on the path as a helpful signpost. Their job is not to become the source, but to direct our attention away from self-reliance and toward a power greater than ourselves. On page 59, Bill provides clear direction. May you find him now. With these words, Bill points our attention directly toward a spiritual source of recovery. Unfortunately, a common mistake happens when we confuse the guide with the actual destination. A true teacher or sponsor simply stands on the path and is very helpful. This is not a job where we want to become anyone else's higher power. We don't, as sponsors, have the answers. We direct our sponsees to find their own answers through the direction they receive from their higher power. So let's consider the exact phrasing Bill uses. He says, it meant the destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. This is the real goal of our recovery, learning to rise completely above our old egos through a higher spiritual power. When he writes, we stood at the turning point, he is preparing us for a massive, life-changing decision. In step 3, we don't just ask for guidance, we ask for protection and care with complete abandon. If we slow down and study the wording, step 3 is actually the most idealistic part of the book because it challenges us with absolute standards. Absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. Bill originally learned these principles from the Oxford group, which was the birthplace of early AA. He purposely left out their official titles so the Big Book wouldn't sound too rigidly religious, but he absolutely kept their spiritual DNA right here in the text. Can we actually live up to these absolute standards on our own power? No, we cannot. But we can become willing to let the steps guide us to that place, using them exactly as they are intended, a suggested program of recovery. Right after this, on page 59, the book lists the 12 steps. Moving to page 60, the next immediately validates our initial shock. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." This reaction makes perfect sense, especially when you look honestly at the deep personal inventory required in step 4 and the vulnerability of sharing it in step 5. Most people are naturally intimidated by that task, but Bill's words quickly comfort us. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. On page 60, the book gives us our true goal. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. One of the best ways to understand this is through the metaphor of the dimmer light switch. The light goes up gradually, one tiny notch at a time, and it never moves on its own. We have to lean into it, putting our shoulder to the switch and pressing gently to move it forward click by click. Because this switch can easily slide backward, the program suggests that we approach the steps and our new lifestyle with gentle persistence. We don't do it aggressively or try to wrestle the process to the ground using sheer force. That would just be our old self-will taking over. Our willpower has a new job now. Its purpose is simply to help us make the daily decision to lean toward that light. Bill says, being convinced we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? To answer that, we have to look at what our will actually means. Our will is simply the human function of making choices about our lives. Bill doesn't give us a complex dictionary definition, but our will is the engine behind our everyday decisions, our actions, and the consequences that follow them. We don't fully see the patterns of those choices yet. We will take a hard look at those exact actions and consequences when we do the step 4 inventory. That is where we will get a much deeper, high-definition understanding of how our self-will has been running our show. And this passage speaks directly to two things that makes us human, which also happen to be the primary components of our addiction: our mental vulnerability to the obsession and our tendency towards self-will and unmanageability. Back in step 2, we made a decision about whether a higher power exists. Our minds accepted the concept, and we began to act as if it were true. Now at step 3, the book asks us to look deeper at what it means to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Bill is appealing to our intellect so that we can fully grasp this transition. If we recall the reading on unmanageability from pages 60 to 62, the lesson is clear. We technically have free will, but it is no longer free when it is driven by our addictions. Left to our own devices, our self-will completely runs riot, making a spiritual connection absolutely necessary. As human beings, we retain our free will and capacity for choice even within recovery. Left entirely to our own devices, our natural tendency is to revert to our destructive patterns of self-will. We must intentionally redirect our willpower. First, in step 2, by choosing a higher power, and then in step 3, by actively committing to a reliant relationship with that power. Pages 60 through 62 illustrate the necessity of this shift by detailing the severe wreckage that occurs when self-will remains unchecked. Although we possess free will, we bear a fundamental responsibility to ourselves to choose a spiritual path over absolute self-reliance. The text outlines the primary requirement for initiating this transformation on page 62. Bill says, this is how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. So look at the specific structure Bill outlines at the bottom of page 62. It says, next we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Instead of being pushed away or intimidated by these traditional titles, we should challenge ourselves to understand them. They simply ask what it looks like to let go of control and partner with a higher power without holding anything back. If you read the first paragraph on page 63, you will see the immediate result of this choice. The step 3 promises. We talk a lot about promises in recovery meetings, usually pointing to the 9th step promises on page 83 and 84. But the promises right here on page 63 are incredible milestones that show a beautiful, direct contrast to the misery of the bedevilments. So when we turn away from the self-centeredness of the bedevilments and focus instead on our higher power and the people around us, a beautiful shift occurs. The bedevilments on page 52 are answered by the promises of the program, matching up almost word for word as a direct solution. The structure is so precise that Bill was undoubtedly aware of the symmetry when he wrote it. In the first paragraph of page 63, we encounter the step 3 promises. These promises give us hope, but they are not the full picture yet. They give us a powerful taste of what is to come, but they are not yet as complete or far-reaching as the full 9th step promises found later in the book. On page 63, Bill summarizes the impact of this step by saying, we were reborn. He points out that this is the moment we finally start to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and what comes next. Bill then takes us directly into the action of the step, noting that many of us said to our Creator, as we understood that, the classic 3rd step prayer. This prayer is an offering of ourselves, asking for relief from the bondage of self and requesting that our difficulties be removed. As a practical tool in this workshop, I suggest taking time to write out your own personal version of this prayer, which was part of the homework. And it isn't an attempt to improve the original text. It's an exercise in true comprehension. When you're forced to translate the big book's words into your own everyday language, you naturally understand the meaning behind them on a much deeper level. So hopefully you guys did the 3rd steps and we can share them afterwards. In what relationship does your heart truly yearn for? At a deep soul level, down to your very cells, what do you want and need from your higher power? On page 47, Bill explains that willingness is the cornerstone of a spiritual arch, serving as the gateway to a new freedom. He reinforces these concepts in step 3, elevating the step to the role of the keystone. In architecture, the keystone sits at the very apex of the arch. It is the single piece that holds the entire structure together, seeming to defy gravity itself. Step 3 carries that exact weight in recovery. It is the keystone that keeps everything else from collapsing, building your entire spiritual foundation together. So let's be clear about step 3. It is a commitment to turn, not the turning itself. It is the profound realization that we must pivot from self-centeredness to selflessness. And as Bill masterfully points out at the end of page 62, we cannot wish or force our ego away on our own power. We must have a higher power's help. In our own strength, we are completely powerless over our flawed, self-willed nature. We simply do not have the power to change our reality alone. So in step 3, we make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Notice that it doesn't say we turn them over to God directly. It says to his care. That single word signals grace. The word turn signals our willingness. Right here lies a beautiful mystery, the intersection of human willingness and divine grace. While Bill doesn't use the word grace explicitly in the big book, he paints it perfectly through models and metaphors. Think of it this way. Step 2 is about a concept, an act of faith in a power greater than ourselves. Step 3 is a decision for a relationship. It reminds us this power is deep down inside of us, making it fully accessible. We must connect with it to overcome both our addiction and our unmanageability. And the real work requires challenging yourselves to identify the deep soul-level yearning that drove your addiction. We often attempt to soothe this inner emptiness by chasing external solutions, wealth, status, physical beauty, personal control, falsely believing they will bring internal harmony. And of course, they never do. This phenomenon aligns with Pascal's observation of the God-shaped vacuum within the human condition. We require a connection to an organismic life force to truly fill that space and find lasting recovery. So are you ready to admit you need a higher power? Step 2 is the willingness to believe. Step 3 is the heavy commitment to take action through steps 4 through 9. Surrendering your will sounds abstract until you look at pages 60 to 62 of the big book. Bill explains that our unmanageability is driven by one thing, core selfishness. We are textbook examples of self-will run riot. Every time we operate out of our ego, we pave the road to our own heartbreak. Our troubles are of our own making, which means willpower will never, ever save us. We have to be entirely rid of self-centeredness, and only a higher power can make that pivot happen for us. And this is what is meant when it's said that our troubles are of our own making. This is what we must be rid of, this selfishness. Bill is now intimating in step 3, you make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God. Do you have the power to do that? There often seems no way of entirely getting rid of this self without God's aid. He is setting the bar very high. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them. Even though we would have liked to, we do what we don't want to do, and we don't do what we do want to do. That is the bullseye target for unmanageability, but it is worthwhile reminding us of that here because it is the launching pad for step 3. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So look at the reality of our condition. We cannot reduce our own self-centeredness by wishing or trying to on our own power. We must have help. There will inevitably come a time and a place where we will have absolutely no mental defense against taking that first drink, drug, or whatever your addiction is. Bill is making a radical point here. We are completely powerless over our own ego. We can't wish it away and we can't fight it alone. We are at once completely helpless, yet entirely responsible for choosing the solution. The transition from the problem to the solution begins on page 62 with a definitive instruction. This is how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. This directive targets the illusion of our self-centeredness. Under the influence of the ego, an individual unconsciously behaves as though the entire world revolves around them. While you may resist this diagnosis initially, a thorough step 4 inventory will inevitably force us to confront a startling truth. We have been demanding that reality conform to our personal scripts. When life naturally deviates from our expectations, we react with what we perceive as justifiable anger. Unmasking this exact pattern of self-delusion is the fundamental objective of the 4th step. And Bill puts it bluntly, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Step 3 is about firing yourself and hiring a new director, employer, and father. It is the shift from an intellectual concept to a real relationship. This simple pivot is the keystone of the archway that leads directly to freedom. Remember the stakes. Step 1 binds us to physical effects of addiction and a chaotic ego. But by step 10, we enter the world of the spirit and step into total neutrality. The obsession is removed and we receive a daily reprieve from our unmanageability. And the catch is, this freedom isn't free. It requires a daily maintenance fee, actively living and practicing steps 10, 11, and 12. And the big book promises that when we sincerely take this position, all sorts of remarkable things will follow. This is why I always encourage you guys to use a set-aside prayer or the set-aside attitude, which simply means maintaining an open mind and an open heart. This isn't a throwaway concept. If you already have a deeply satisfying relationship with a higher power, I am absolutely not suggesting that you abandon it. I am simply inviting you to approach this work with the openness to see if you are being offered an upgrade, a larger concept, a greater expectation, and a deeper hope. Look at the promises that await us. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. And a higher power gives us what we need, not what we think we want. And the catch is we have to stay close through daily step 11's conscious contact. When Bill says to perform God's work well, he's talking about step 12. It means living for the highest good of yourself and the people around you, sharing the freedom from addiction, and dropping the weight of your past bedevilments. This turns us from self-centered to other-centered, but in a healthy way, entirely free of codependency. As Melody Beattie explains it, it's about shifting your focus from controlling others to truly caring for yourself. So you cultivate self-awareness, build rock-solid boundaries, and practice detachment from other people's drama. You stop trying to control how everyone else acts or feels, and you learn to rely on the spiritual design of living. Bill emphasizes that we must think carefully before taking step 3, ensuring we are fully prepared to completely surrender ourselves to a higher power. Early AA members found it highly beneficial to take this spiritual step with an understanding person. In the 1930s, this meant a wife, a partner, a best friend, spiritual advisor, maybe somebody from your church, as the formal concept of an AA sponsor was not introduced until a decade later. Bill notes that it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. And while finding an understanding person was difficult then, today we are fortunate to have a vast community of sponsors, step guides, all kinds of people to share this step with. And the exact wording of the step 3 prayer is optional, provided it authentically expresses the core idea of total surrender without reservation. If you notice any personal reservations holding you back, it is a sign to revisit your step 2 decision. Have you asked yourself, is the higher power you have big enough? Is that power real enough for you? If you're not feeling like you're getting past the bedevilments, it's probably time for a God upgrade. And if you struggle to trust a higher power to be greater than yourself, can you at least be willing to trust the process? And the core purpose of recovery is learning to turn toward and align yourself with the natural life force for power. This transition does not mean blindly handing over complete control of your will and existence. Rather, it means intentionally placing your thoughts, choices, and life into the protective, supportive care of that life force power. I am not turning my will and my life over to the life force. I am turning my will and my life over to the care of the life force. And consider this life source as the GPS. Remember the analogy of the GPS that we need to listen to and follow its directions? So we listen to the directions, and step 10 will provide the immediate directions I need when I lose my alignment with my higher power. Whenever we violate core spiritual principles by harboring dishonesty, resentment, secrets, or engaging in inappropriate sexual behavior, my emotions and conscience instantly signal the indiscretion. This internal disturbance is a direct call to make a swift course correction. I think most of the GPSs say recalculating. While step 3 is the initial commitment to live in alignment with this power, step 10 is the daily practice that maintains it. As Bill W. wrote in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, whenever we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. Ultimately, emotional disturbance is simply an indicator that I am out of alignment with reality. So this was lost, Lisa, a woman trapped in heavy chains because I was deeply out of alignment with myself and my higher power. I couldn't see how close my freedom was. For years, as long as I believed and acted as if my fears were true, they became my reality. My breakthrough was realizing that I was the one creating my own fear in prison. I didn't truly grasp this until I worked through the steps for the third time and realized I needed to upgrade my inadequate higher power. When I first read steps 1, 2, and 3, I kind of brushed them off. Oh, I have my beliefs. I'm good. And I almost ignored them. On page 55 of the big book, Bill promises, with this attitude, you cannot fail. Once I had my spiritual awakening, my attitude shifted into one of true detachment from the pitfalls of addiction and life's unpredictable twists. This freedom came because I finally left the end results up to my creator. I got out of the control business And now I intentionally give my creator as much space as I possibly can. I am human and my memory is long, so I constantly have to turn again and recommit. However, I willingly put in the daily time and effort to continue this upward journey, keeping my creator firmly in the driver's seat. So one of the assignments was to write out your own step 3 prayer version and using the actual prayer. This is my own editing, and I put it up so I could share it with the group. So I revised it to say, Creator, I offer myself to thee. Please create within me the strength to see differently. Relieve me of the bondage of my misperceptions, fear of the unknown, and show me a sense of truth and reality so that I may do what is the best and highest good for all involved. Take away any doubts and lack of faith so that I may live my life in your endless glory and peace. May I bear witness to those I would co-create your promises with, your immense unconditional love, and your perfect creation of all. May I co-create in love with you always. So that's my third step, revised prayer. And I'm hoping that some of you all also revised it. If anyone wants to volunteer their version.
So the prayer, I actually, to be honest, I like my prayer from last year better. I'm not gonna
Okay.
lie.
No,
So I
that's good.
did.
That's fine.
So I'm gonna work with both of them. I did do the homework. So I did do a prayer to do the homework. Let me see. Yeah, can you turn off the recording?
Yep.
Um, Thank you. I found it, I think it was kind of interesting. I took a lot of notes, and then for, I guess I kind of slowed down and I didn't take any notes. So it was kind of like a mixed bag. And I thought that it was kind of interesting, some of the things that I notated. And some of this literature, I go through it quite a bit because of the different places that I go. But
Right.
it kind of hit me in terms of the assignment. So we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. And I guess maybe I'm like kind of like reflecting on, like on that just sort of like a reminder. We didn't do it like a little bit, and then it tells us, like, in that chapter that became the way that they usually read it in the beverage program before every meeting. But like, half measures avail me nothing. So like, if I ask, you know what I mean, like I
Yep.
can ask for real, so I can ask with complete abandon. um,
Right.
the result was nil until we let go absolutely. So that kind of stuff sort of was like echoing over and over, because like, it's a daily reprieve, but sometimes I think like maybe I'll pray on Tuesday, and because I know, I a lot of times, to be honest, like I also do the regular step 3 from the big book. So some of
Hmm.
it can get rote. And if you're just kind of
Right.
doing it rote, you may not be doing a complete abandon. And I'm talking about myself. I might just be just reading it to say that I'm doing it, and then go ahead and do whatever I want, which doesn't really help me.
Hmm.
Um, so we thought we could find like an easier, softer way. And I I don't see it as easily with myself, but I see it with some of the people that I'm working with. Like I have a new person that wanted me to work with them, and probably in big part because I'm doing this, I said yes, just because like I'm also supposed to be doing 12. And then it's a reminder. I know working with them is a reminder of where I'm deficient. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because like, I will tend to find, how can I do an easier, softer way? And really at this point is, how can I not surrender? And to kind of wrap up, I think something that really kind of keyed in for me is like I can be a producer of confusion rather than harmony. And especially I can be that way when I'm just doing what I want to do, when I'm not actually in surrender. And there's lots of other stuff that I saw, but I can leave it there. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. When Bill says we wanted to find an easier, softer way, what do you think he means by that?
What do I think he means by that?
Yeah, yeah,
I think in the context, like in the context of his story, for example, if I think about him on the bed when Eddie Thatcher comes to meet him, you know what I mean? In that
yeah.
context, like maybe there's some way I don't have to do what Ebby's telling me to do.
Hmm.
Like if there's some, like Ebby comes in, Ebby's got religion. Um, like I don't really know if I'm interested in that. I'm not interested in continuing to drink and be depressed, but I just don't know if I'm willing to do that. Sort of like the Meatloaf song. Like I don't know.
Yep,
I can't do that. Sort of like that thing.
right.
But so for me that kind of comes up that the easier, softer way is me trying another way with my ego, like me figuring it out, like maybe, kind of like, the guy with the whiskey and the milk or these other people, like maybe I can hold on to the resentments. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that. But I think really there is no easier, softer way. I'm just using my ego. And every time I get to that place that I'm back to one, then I got to go to two, and then I got to go to three. So that would be my answer. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting you answered that way because it's kind of what I was thinking, which is why I questioned you on it, is when he says easier, softer way, what I think for me, what Bill's saying is the easier, softer way is what we've already done to beat our unmanageability, which is to pick up addictions. And in the beginning, they did seem easier and softer until they didn't. So I think we're pretty much on the same wavelength there, Mark. Thank you for answering that.
Okay, hi everybody.
Hi, Joel.
How you doing? So I did the prayer. Last year, my prayer was mishmash. This year it's a mishmash, but I like it more.
Oh,
Um,
improvement. Good.
Improvement. So
Good.
here's my prayer. It's a mishmash, but that's okay.
Hmm.
Um, Higher power, take me as I am, believing deeper as time moves forward, and slowly so that I don't complain, teach me, guide me to do your will, so as to make me what I have never been. Better, better to myself in body, soul, and outwardly to others as a person. As I journey with you, I will do your will. Take away my troubles and difficulties so that I can better and with clearer vision do your will as a good person. I seek your love, companionship, and teaching, and may I learn and live your teachings and have your companionship and share it with others.
Excellent. That's really good. Do you use the prayer?
Uh, It's funny. I've been using the other prayers, but I haven't been using the third step prayer, so I'm going to incorporate it.
Nice.
And I'll incorporate my version of it too if it gets the seal of approval, you know.
Well, it's already approved. If you wrote it, then that's the end all and be all because it's yours.
Mm. It doesn't violate any major tenets of the
Take
of
your
the thing.
lawyer hat off.
That's-
This is a personal thing. You don't have to worry. You're
Mm.
not breaking any laws. When I pray and I pray prayers, um, my mind wanders. Like I've been saying them for so long that my mind starts to wander. So I had to realize that it's better if I talk to God unscripted or mix up the words in a prayer, so I have to actually really think about what I'm saying. But so much time in my life was spent just remotely saying prayers over and over again. I remember when I was a child, my grandmother was a very devout Catholic. She would do the rosary every morning at 6 a.m. on the radio. And I would hear this, going through this whole, it took about an hour, I think. And I used to wonder, why would she keep saying the same prayer over and over and over again? I never could understand that. I still don't understand it. I mean, I understand it's a ritual, but for me, those formal prayers, I go on, do my shopping list, what laundry do I need to do? I just get really lost in the automatic prayers. So these ones that we write are so suited to ourselves and to our very specific connection with our higher power, that whenever you can use them, even in place of the ones that we've been practicing our whole lives, it can really make a difference in your prayer structure and in what your day looks like. Because now you're coming with a fresh mind. You got a blank slate and you put that information on there, and then you're going to go out into the world with it. And it's going to retain better because it's new. It's not just, oh, I know that prayer, throw it back in the back of my head and get on with my day. So if anyone else is feeling like, your typical everyday prayers are just needing an upgrade, it's a good way to do it is write your own prayers. Why do we feel we need to read or say someone else's prayer? It should be our own, or take a prayer and make it your own.
Thanks. Mine is a bullet point prayer.
Okay.
Okay. Help me notice when my ego pops out. Help me know when I'm not being helpful, dash controlling. Help me think positively and help me be kind.
I like that.
I need to put it in more flowery wording,
Yeah.
acceptable to the higher power. But,
I think any prayer that anyone makes is acceptable.
Mhm.
A prayer is a prayer is a prayer. You can't do it wrong.
I know my husband, who's the atheist, when we talk about um, our thought, we're sending our thoughts and prayers, and he says thoughts are prayers, you know.
Some
So,
people do believe that. If you're
mhm,
thinking, you're praying. If you're praying, you're thinking. So be careful what you're thinking about because it's
be
prayer.
careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Some people do believe that.
mhm,
And I guess, if God is everything, then that would be true, correct?
mhm.
So, yeah, I probably would agree with that. Um, but like I said, somebody created these prayers, um, probably thousands of years ago, and we're just remotely saying them over and over again. And
The Lord's
maybe,
Prayer, they
yeah,
say, and on the Apostles' Creed and all this type of
all
thing
that
that you
stuff.
say over and over, and
Yep.
and then you think, do I really believe this?
Mhm.
That type of thing.
I was in a church 2 weeks ago for a funeral, and I hadn't been in the church in 30 or 40 years. Nothing had changed. And they amazingly came back to my memory, word for word. That's how ingrained into
Mhm.
my mind they were. And I was really amazed that I could recite. As soon as, the phrase where you have to respond, I knew all of the responses even.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And it made me realize that it was robotic almost. My
Mhm.
religion prior to my spiritual awakening was on a more robotic feel. It just felt like just going through the passage, like my grandmother just going through the rosary beads to get it over with.
Mhm.
And but she would not miss a day. She would not. She was petrified. If she missed a day, something horrible would happen. And I remember even as a child thinking, boy, that's not the God I want to think about or believe in. My poor grandmother.
This is Heidi.
Hi, Heidi.
I didn't do it because I'm working on it, but
Okay.
seeing yours, that's the concept I was struggling with, that I never heard that before. So here you are now with your prayer, and it sounds wonderful being co-create with the creator because we are creators.
Yes, we are.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So I truly loved it. I'm gonna watch it over and over and then make mine. So I totally agree with the thing that once we learn these prayers or serenity prayer or third step prayer or seven, we just say it in
Yep.
my mind at least, even in meetings. And I remember when Herb wanted to have the group to say it together, the third step prayer. And poor man, he was so clear about what he wants, but
Yeah.
everybody was just, let's start again. He said, let's start again. This is not what I want. I want
Yeah.
slowly to remember or realize what you're saying, God, when you said God. So I know it was difficult for many people.
Yeah.
For
Part
me,
of
yes,
part of that difficulty too is it because we're on an internet system when we're in his meeting, the delays are different from everybody. So it sounds like people aren't grasping what's going on as far as, speaking together, but you can't hear it when you're doing it yourself.
it was more about that everybody was just, they want to say it, He just wanted to say one sentence and then pause. And they didn't get the pause, like, okay, just wait a little bit and then say it the next one and pause because just listen what you're saying. Yeah,
Right.
that's interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and
So
I think a lot of us do that. We get a prayer in front of us. We've been saying it for decades, and we just go, Zzz. All right, I'm done.
right.
Go do my day.
I did it for years actually. Okay, let's get over with this, right? I meditated now. I say this prayer and
Yeah,
I can go with my day, right? So
exactly.
lately, what I did with to slow down my brain with this, if I say the prayers, I say it twice. One just comes like "Trrr," I remember very well, right? And the
Yep.
next and say it again. So it's kind of like my mind catches up. Like, what did you say?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much for everything.
I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one that zips through my prayers.
No, no, you're not.
Okay, so I've decided to go retrograde. My prayer has turned out to be the 23rd Psalm. I like that significantly. I think it's much more meaningful than the third step prayer. Uh, it is traditional, but it to me has more meaning.
All
And
right. Can you recite it at all? Because I can't tell you that I know which one that is, but if you start saying it, I might know it.
I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a really iconic psalm. Yeah, that's a wonderful one. And you have it memorized. So when you're saying it, are you da 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 da, or are you really thinking about the words?
I think about the words because I think it's a very powerful
Mhm.
symbolism in the 23rd Psalm, and I
Yeah.
like the Saint Francis prayer as
Yeah.
interpreted by Herb because I don't like the last line.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of it. You can change that part.
I follow Herb K's change,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Exactly.
ego.
Mhm.
Not
You
my-
know, I read about that prayer, and apparently he did not actually write the prayer himself.
oh
My
no, I assume it's been changed numerous times over.
exactly.
That's what I
Exactly.
heard. It's not by him, but
Yeah.
everybody knows,
But
which
everyone
is
knows it as the St. Francis prayer, which is kind of ironic because
And there are lots of different interpretations in the listing of different positive and negative responses and opposites.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I like
Yeah.
them both because to me they bring you back to thinking about
And that's the important part of the prayer. If it invokes something in you, then you're on the right track. If you were just saying it like I was just saying it, or my grandmother, it's not going to do a whole lot. But you're actually having feeling around the words and the prayer, and it moves you to a degree. And that's what's important.
right. I think the 23rd Psalm is a beautiful piece of poetry
Yeah.
as far as the St. James version is concerned, or the
Yeah.
King James version, not St. James.
Yeah,
King
I
James.
agree. That's a great one. Yeah, enjoy the 4th of July, enjoy the freedom, which is what we're all here trying to find, the independence, but stay away from your addictions, whatever they are. If it's food, stay away. Booze, stay away. Drugs, whatever it is, stay away. The 4th of July is independence from our ego. Think of it that way. Definitely be inspired by the freedom of the 4th of July that we'll all get to experience. God,
God
grant
grant
us
us
grant
the
us
the
serenity
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 to accept
To
to
that
accept
accept
the
that
things
we
things
things
cannot
we
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 cannot
change,
cannot
cannot
change,
courage to
change,
change,
change, things we
courage
can,
courage
courage
to
courage
to
change
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 things we
things we
things
things
can,
we
we
can,
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 no
and
and
wisdom
wisdom
wisdom to
wisdom
know
know the
for
the
the
difference.
difference.
wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Sounds
That was
wonderful.
comical.
Okay, Lisa, are you going to make us say it again slower like Herb?
No, that was too enjoyable. That
It
was
was fun.
perfect, spot on. But you can all go home and practice that if you feel so
Yeah.
inclined. I definitely won't stop you.
Love it.
So enjoy the holiday.
Same to
I
You
will,
you.
if anybody
too.
needs to be in touch, I'm here. If not, I will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much.
Awesomeness. Thank
thank
you, Lisa,
you.
so
Bye
much, and
bye.
everyone.